Good evening and welcome to Democratic TV, a program where democratic values important to our community are discussed and shared with all. My name is Doug Veum and I will be your host this evening for a discussion with our election administrators about the upcoming elections in 2018. Our guests for this program are Cliff Rodgers, our election administrator, and Chris Davis, the assistant election administrator for Knox County. And I welcome both Cliff and Chris to this. I know you're really veterans of the airwaves in Knoxville, and I appreciate being on here with
Thank
us.
you. Although I've never been on this show
Well, you
before.
haven't. Chris
has.
Right, okay, well, so
yeah,
this is Chris.
Delighted to be here.
This is Cliff's first show. Exactly. I know that you're both veterans, as I said, of the airways, and just thank you for being here. Tonight, we'll try to cover a lot of details about the upcoming elections in 2018, some information on how to actually vote in these elections, information on voter registration, and some discussion of the security of our election system, which is so much in the news today, and why you should be confident as a voter in Knox County on how your election system works and what safeguards are in place to make sure that the votes cast are actually counted correctly. Is that fair to say?
Sounds good.
All
Yes.
right, good enough. So that being said, why don't we start with who's eligible to vote?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you need to be 18 years of age
Okay.
by the date of the election.
By the,
the date of the
you
election.
can register then at a 17-year-old.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. And you need to be a citizen.
Right.
A lot of talk about that.
Now, do you certify that you're a citizen, or how do you?
That's right. In Tennessee, we don't ask for any documentation unless there's a reason after the fact to
Right.
think there's an issue. But we just take you at your word.
Right.
Just like we take you at your word when you say that you're not a felon, which
Right.
is another
Okay.
requirement.
So if you're a felon, you should indicate that.
That's right. And of course, you're going to get rejected,
Rejected.
and then we'll work with David Twiggs of
Right,
our office,
right,
works with folks to help get their voting rights
Okay,
restored.
restore those things.
Yes.
So you have to be a citizen, and your signature verifies that you declare yourself as a citizen. I presume that if you then are found out not to be, there is a sanction for that.
Well, there's a process for it, and we've got some information today
Yeah.
on 4 individuals that we're going to send some information to and ask for documentation.
documentation.
That's the first time that's happened in about 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
It's rare. Now, the other thing you need to be, of course, is a Knox County resident.
Okay, right. So it's 18, citizen, resident.
That's right.
All right. Okay.
And students get to decide if they want to be a resident of
Right.
Knox County when they're going to UT or Pellissippi or wherever. That's up to them. Or if they want to stay a resident of where they grew up, Memphis or wherever, that's up to them. We don't.
A choice.
Let's cover that in a minute because I do have a question about that. So we've got those qualifications, and students have an option. Is there any other reason are any other things they need to have to register just to be there? You have to register in person?
No, you don't.
Okay, all right.
So we got 2 ways. You can do it by mail or in person. The advantage to in person is that if you then qualify to vote absentee by mail,
Oh yeah, okay.
all right, then you are able to do that the first time. Otherwise, if we get something in the mail and then we register you,
Yeah.
then you're going to have to vote in person either early or on election day the first go around. And then after that, if you're out of town or if you're 60 or older, like some of us here, then you
I
get a
bet to
free
that.
pass. Yes, but
Yeah.
then you get to vote by mail. And as I tell a lot of seniors, you never have to show up in person again the rest of your life.
Okay, now
We also have online voting.
Yeah,
Wanna
that's
throw
right.
that out there.
Registration.
Not voting, registration.
Online
In fact,
registration.
I wanted to do press on that too. But
Yeah.
let me ask one other question about the registration. If you're over 60, what constitutes registering in person? I mean, is that with the League of Women Voters that you could do that with, or do you have to be at the commission office?
Well, a sworn election official, okay, we're doing a voter registration drive somewhere, and we do. Then if we've got sworn election officials, that's in person. You come to our office, that's in person. If
Okay.
you're dealing with a government agency where you're presenting something and getting registered there, and they get to see a document.
The voter
That's right.
Yeah.
Then when we get those in, we treat those as in person. And if you register by mail and realize I really need to have a ballot mailed to me, you can come to our office and we can convert it with you show us an ID.
So there's a number of places you can show up in person. 2, if you can do it even after the fact.
Yes.
And
Yes.
3, once you do it, then you can have an absentee ballot for the coming election.
That's right.
If you apply correctly for it. Now, Chris,
If you meet the
if you meet those requirements, 18, whatever. What is the online registration? And I've been curious about that, so you're going to be informing me as well. On
Well,
this.
actually, the General Assembly passed, I guess, last year, and it went into effect officially July 1, but I think it was more like September to get all the bugs out. But voters in the state of Tennessee can now register online to vote, or they can change their address online to vote, which is huge for us because we did a study. We started this in Knox County in sometime in, I guess, early September, I guess it was. And we looked at September through December, essentially, when we had had about 600 people go online and take advantage of this. And it was about half and half between new registrations and change of addresses. And why that's important is, as you know, we're in a very transitory society. People move around. And so we really advocate people changing their address before they go, because you can still go and vote if you changed.
I know you can.
But in early voting, of course, you can go anywhere, but you're going to have to fill out some paperwork, which slows you down. On election day, you're going to have to do the same thing, which can slow you down. And you have to vote in the precinct where you live. And so maybe you moved from this side of town to that side of town. You're not voting here anymore.
You're a different precinct.
That's right. So if you change your address, you'll be ready to go.
This is important information. In fact, I'm really glad to hear this because, one, as an election judge, you guys let me be a judge for a number of years, and we ran into that situation almost every election with more than one or two people who had moved from somewhere and didn't really know what to do about it. Which means that those people, if you moved, you can register online. You correct your address online.
You change your address online.
If you're change your address. If you're a student, you can come to school in the fall and go online and say, "Here's where I live." I'm registered now in Knox County.
That's right.
At that point, right? Okay.
That's right. So as long as you register 30 days prior to the election.
Right. Exactly. So and I guess what we're saying to our audience tonight is that there is really no reason not to register to vote, because it's pretty darn easy if you just put yourself out a little bit to do it, right?
It really is, and the good thing we like is you can go to our website, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about, but our website, which is knoxcounty.org/election, you can actually go there and do it online. You can change your address, or you can register to vote. And it's quick and it's easy, and literally we're one of the few counties in the state where literally every single day of the calendar, even Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, people are getting online and they're doing this. They're either registering to vote or changing their address. So it's available 24/7.
All the time. Now, you also can go online to determine if you are registered, if you have a question about that. We'll talk about that probably a little bit later, but I mean, that also is one of the important functions of the website.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
okay. And one that I think you guys want to do. All right, so I'm registered. Now, how do I vote?
Well, we want you to vote early.
Yeah.
We don't want anybody waiting till election day. My goal, and I tell people this, is that we want everybody to vote early. We don't want anybody on election day, because as you just mentioned, then you've got to be at the right place. Early voting, you can go to any of them.
Now I know that Tennessee has had early voting since in the 90s, I believe, and so we should really know that, but I'm not sure we do.
Well, I think one of the things, and I want to throw this out there because I know sometimes early voting is seen as a partisan issue, but for us here in the Election Commission office, we see it as an election administration issue, because there's nothing wrong, like Cliff said, with early voting. And in fact, and I want to brag for a second on us, there's 95 counties in the state of Tennessee. And if you go back to the November 2016 presidential election, 95 counties in the state of Tennessee, Knox County was second out of those 95 counties. Number two in the percent of its citizens that voted early.
Okay.
We beg people to vote early, and we, like he says, we like 100%, but realistically, if we could get 75 to 80% every election, it cuts down on the problems because, and I think he'll testify to this, 80+% of the problems we see are election day related. I can't get into my polling place. I can't find a parking spot. The school resource officer won't let me in. I got sick. I had an emergency. Car broke down. Whatever it is, there's nothing wrong with those 14 days of early voting.
Right, exactly. I know one of the, in the Bill Lyons, Billy Stair book, they talk about, they've updated their book now, so they talk about this in it. And they talk about the fact that early voting was intended to increase the turnout, and they were finding about half the people were voting early. What percentage do we vote here in Knoxville? Is it more than 50% in Knoxville?
Well, it depends on the election, and the worst turnout for that is in the presidential preference primary, because people are waiting to see who's going to still be in it when I go vote tomorrow. But most of them you're going to see around 50%. But when you get to the November election, like we're having this year, we want it up in that 65 to 70%, Doug. That's really our goal, to cut down those lines on election day.
So what we need to do is we need to show this program again and again and
Absolutely.
again, because this is something.
And remember, we've got 10 early voting locations here in Knox County compared to, say, Chattanooga, who has 4. And we've also going to open one of them. It's starting at 8 o'clock in the morning, and some of them will go to 7 o'clock at night the last 3 days. So we got 2 Saturdays.
Yeah, so we made a lot of effort, and we need our audience to know that. Remember that. Okay. Maybe this is a little early, but let's talk, before we go into some of the details, let's talk a little bit about voting security. If I've registered, I've taken care of my personal information, you're protecting that. How about the vote I cast? Why should I think it's going to get counted in the right spot?
Well, first of all, your viewers need to know, and we talk about it time and time again, we are not hooked up to the internet. The voting system is not hooked up to the internet. So there's no way that data can be hacked or changed.
Yeah, there's no way to get into it.
Well, and we don't have the capability to hook up even if we want
That's
to.
right. And the other thing that folks need to know is that we have conspiracy theorists out there that think, well, we bring somebody in to program the machines. How can we be sure how they're being programmed? Here in Knox County, our machine techs do it. Frank Shingle, who represents the Democratic Party, Chuck Brantley represents the Republican Party. They do it together, and they run a private machine test to be sure that they're working. Then we have a public machine test. The vote is recorded in 3 different locations. So even if we have a problem with the machine you're casting your vote on, the e-slate, it's recorded over in that judge's booth control that issues that access code. And it's recorded in 2 places on the e-slate. So we've never lost a vote. And you can say that when the Democrats were in charge and the Republicans. And that's one of the first things I checked out when I got the job, was to be sure that those machines are secure. Now, the other issue, of course, is the information you provide when you register to vote. And that goes into a database at Knox County. Knox County IT is constantly working on improving the firewalls, protecting that data. The Election Commission doesn't have anything to do with that aspect.
But the county does.
The county does, and I have complete confidence in those folks over there. People need to be more concerned probably about that personal data at their bank or their credit union and some of these other groups that haven't done such a good job of protecting that data.
Which is interesting, because they have a whole lot more data.
Yes.
And you'd think that they would be a lot more concerned about access to it. And I mean, not that you don't have a lot of data, and the actual vote is really important. I mean,
that's right.
But that is not an online issue.
That's right.
You have a computer, but the computer just helps you calculate, keep track of the information and all. And now today, if I wanted to go back and look at the voting in, say, 2014, you keep the records of that election. You know what votes are cast. You know a lot of detail.
Well, and we have all of when we certify the election, the County Election Commission, after an election, certifies it. And all of those official records, some of them are sent to the state, some of them are sent to the clerk's office over here for filing, so that we have permanent records of all of that.
Okay, so now we've got people registered, we've got them confident that their data is protected, we've got them confident that if they cast a vote, that vote will be counted for the person they actually voted for. So what does the Election Commission do after that has happened? What do you guys do? What are the appointed? I know as administrators you have a staff that works on it, that counts the ballots. What's going on in that what I would call a boiler room?
Yeah, and that's what we call the tally room.
Okay,
that's where they can, and everybody needs to know that there are election commissioners from both parties there at all times. When we have what we call the live ballot, when those mobile ballot boxes that have the votes to record, and you have your commissioners bringing up those from the small assembly room, carrying them up in sealed envelopes, presenting them to the commissioners that are there. They're opened, and then they're put in a reader. And
that is not hooked up to the internet.
That's right.
That's independent too.
And it's one of our fine Democratic staff members, LaRonda Myers, is the one that's sitting there, and she's the first one that sees how those are being read. And so we get the results there, and at some point along the way, we'll start recording those results on a thumb drive, which is here, and then it is pulled out. So there's no way that information can be hacked. Take it over to the computer where it's going to be read, and then sent out on the internet, Doug, and then that's when you'll start seeing the returns on election night.
Right, yeah, which is really nice now that it's so automated, because the returns come in really early. You guys, Chris may not be old enough, but you and I remember when they took forever to come in.
Right.
I appreciate the compliment.
And,
Yes, I am older.
and if we go back to all paper ballots,
Yeah.
it's not going to be quick
No, I know,
again.
I know,
And I am.
Yeah. In fact, we won't spend any more time on this, but the way they're counted here makes a lot of sense to me, and the fact that there's a record kept that no one has access to except
That's right.
authorized people means that it's very secure, and the paper ballot would not make it any more secure.
Not in my view.
You can go back and recount every vote cast, vote by vote by vote, as I understand it.
Well, I talked to Greg McKay about this a few weeks ago, and he and I agree on one thing,
Yeah.
that if you put a bunch of paper ballots in a room and you have people go count them, and they go back and count them later, it's going to be different. They're never going to be the same.
Have you ever counted your wallet and found it to get the...
That's right.
It's the same amount every time?
But, a system that we have, and you can examine the data on those mobile ballot boxes in the event a judge orders a recount. And we've seen it as we were moving forward that potential Amendment 1 litigation
Sure.
that's
Right.
been,
Right.
and we've still got that data stored waiting for the United States Supreme Court to see if they're going to get involved or
That's
not.
right. Yeah, in fact, we won't talk about this much tonight, but that's an important. The fact of how you did that was important. Okay, so we're now registered, and we know how to vote. We can go on the website, find our voting place, and all. What are the elections? What, for example, is the difference between a primary election and a general election?
Okay, primary parties, if you look in the state law, it is for members of that party, members of the Democratic Party, to decide who they want to elect to run in the general election, which will be after the May primary coming up August the 2nd. Now, as you know, we kind of have an open system here in Tennessee. In other words, when you come in, we're going to ask, in which primary do you wish to vote? And if you answer one or the other, then that's the ballot you're going to get. Some people won't tell you. In the primary, they go, well, it's none of your business.
Right.
Well, and then all we can do is give them that school board ballot if they have one, the general.
Yeah.
And there is a way that a voter could be challenged by judges in that party. Like if you, a prominent Democrat, came in and said you want to vote in the Republican primary.
I don't think they would let me.
Well, the issue could be raised if they knew you.
Yes,
but the problem in a county this size, unless you're somebody, the only people that can't vote in the other party's primaries that would lose their positions are the election commissioners.
Themselves.
They have to vote.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right,
and that's been changed recently. They've made it clear you lose your job immediately
if you don't vote in your own primary. The other thing is the primaries are essentially run at the behest of the party.
That's correct.
Right? Okay.
Well,
But
it's
everywhere but Knox County, because in Knox County our charter requires it. We're the only one that I'm aware of in Tennessee that says that's why we don't send the letters to the parties and say, hey, we need you all to ask whether you want one. You're getting a primary.
Okay.
The Republicans are getting a primary
by
charter, by the Knox County charter.
Which then leads me to another question. Who pays for the primary?
Well, Knox County does.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's always paid to the county, except for one exception, and that's in that March presidential preference primary, because we elect to run it pursuant to the charter, move our May to March. At that point, the state says, okay, you put it together, then we will pay for it. So we catch a break on that March primary.
Okay. I'm glad we talked about this, because I learned something. I did not realize it was a charter in the Knox County charter that precludes us from running a caucus, for example.
That's right. You have to have it, and it eliminates, and it's for all positions, including the judges.
Right. Okay. All right. So that handles that. So that's what a primary is. A primary is essentially nominating the candidates for the general election from each of the two parties.
Right.
All right.
Now that's different from a city primary, just to be clear,
right.
where
Well,
you have a bunch of
where you don't have partisans,
candidates, narrow it down to two.
Right. Exactly. In fact, I was going to ask about that. Okay. There are two or three other things like that. The city commission, the city council, and the school board, aren't they both? They're both nonpartisan elections.
Right.
And in a nonpartisan election, for example, in the first district in the school board, there are 3 candidates. If one of them should get 50 plus 1 votes,
that candidate's name will be the only one on the ballot. It's not that person is elected.
No, but he's the only one on the
But
ballot.
as a practical matter, it's going to be tough.
He or she, yes. Okay.
Will be on it, and then if nobody gets it, then the top 2 candidates would move on.
One gets 40, one gets 30, one gets...
That's
10
right.
whatever the
And
election
let's
is.
pray we don't have a tie between second and third place again.
418 votes.
Yeah.
Don't say that word.
Okay, so now what is a general election?
All right, and that's where, of course, the nominees, if you will, from each of the parties come together, and they're going to run against each other.
Along with any independents.
That's
Yes,
right.
Who
okay,
are
right.
not.
And that's
Good
important,
point.
and we've
Okay,
had a
right.
lot of independents, especially weighing in for the November
Sure.
election.
So the independent voters in a partisan primary, the independent nominees in or people on the ballot as independents, the primary doesn't mean anything.
No, they skip right over
It's-
that,
okay,
but
they don't appear on the ballot.
but they
either.
have the same deadlines
Yeah,
and the
okay.
same reporting requirements for
Okay.
financial disclosures
Okay.
as do the candidates for the two major parties.
Okay, so an independent candidate or someone who wants to run as an independent
Right.
candidate has to file a petition
That's
in
right.
time for the primary,
That's
even
correct.
though that primary
That's
doesn't
right.
mean
That's
anything
correct.
for them. Okay.
Yeah.
And if there are 5 who file as independents, there'll be 5 in the general.
That's correct. Assuming,
That's right.
assuming they're all, assuming they all
Okay.
meet all the qualifications.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So we've got these two elections, and I know that confuses people. Then the next thing is, when are these elections? I mean, I hear about these primaries, these generals. What's going on in
Well, we got
2018?
your primaries are your county primary is always going to be either in March or May of even numbered years. And in presidential years, it'll be in March, first Tuesday in March, and then your county primary will always be your first Tuesday in May of every other even numbered year, 2018, 2022.
Right. The off year election.
That's right, if you will. Then your county general, along with your state and federal primary,
Right.
will be in August. It's always a first Thursday in
In
August,
August,
which
right,
this
yeah.
year will be just
Right.
a little bit weird thing they wrote
Yeah.
into state law, but it'll be the first Thursday in August.
Uh-huh.
And then your state and federal general, which obviously every 4 years is your presidency, but in those off years would be your governor in Tennessee, so your House of Representatives, all your state House seats, all your state
Right.
Senate seats, and depending on the year and the terms, potentially a United States senator
Right.
as well could be on that ballot.
Right. Now you understand why people are confused.
I do.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
hard to keep up with.
Yeah. All right. So in May, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be running a primary election, which will nominate essentially the partisan nominees. The parties will nominate people for the offices on the county ballot: the sheriff, the mayor.
Those are the two big ones. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
There
a
are-
number of fee offices.
There are several fee offices,
county
and there are
commission,
4
school board. Yeah.
There are 4 commissioners.
That's right.
Yeah,
right.
for that.
And then we, kind of bring along the nonpartisan
Yes,
school
okay,
board
right,
races
that's
there
right, okay.
at the end.
Yeah, but they're on the county. They're on the county primary.
That's
so
right.
The school board will be elected essentially in the next election, in the August election.
It's certainly in 3 of the 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, yes.
Right. Okay. So the first primary is for the county. The
That's right.
senator, the congressman, the governor, those offices are not in that primary. But we get to August.
And it's
August
just
4th.
crazy
Yes,
because
all right.
now you have the local general election in conjunction with the primary
Right.
for the federal and state offices.
Uh-huh.
And that ballot is huge.
And then
with
on
all,
top of that is the town of Farragut's
Yeah.
municipal election.
So the last go around, we had 89 ballot combinations as a result. And before you get to it, I'm just going to throw it out there now. That's the reason that we and a lot of others don't want to see the city of Knoxville elections
okay.
also thrown
Right,
into
right,
it, because
okay.
then we'd be up to about 125 ballot combinations, and you've really converted your nonpartisan city elections to
Right.
partisan elections,
Right.
which if somebody's for it, that's fine, but that's
Yeah,
what it does.
that's right.
And
Now,
But for those people who are nonpartisan fans, we
Yeah.
get calls even during the odd numbered years.
Uh-huh.
Well, who's the Republican and who's the
Okay,
Democrat?
even though it's a nonpartisan.
and that would
Man.
be exacerbated times 10
Right,
if
yeah.
they were moved to an even numbered year.
Right. Okay. Well, a question I was going to ask you is why is the city in the odd numbered years?
Yeah.
And that's a big part
plus,
of it.
I can tell you that the city council doesn't want to move it because fundraising
Yeah,
for
I know.
those races,
yeah.
when you're having to compete against
County
these
mayor,
major
sheriff.
races,
It's
Be tough.
No
Be
question.
real
It's
tough.
crazy now too, and with term limits, there are a lot of open seats.
that's right.
And so that those elections get to be pretty serious.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a primary election, we've got a general election. On August, is it 4th?
Yes.
August 2nd.
August 2nd.
this
That's
year.
right. It's,
August 2nd
The
this year.
first Thursday,
The first Thursday in August.
Yeah.
There is a two election. If I'm a voter, can I come in? I have to come in I can declare my party to vote in the state and federal elections.
Right, but if
And
you
then I can-
refuse to do it,
I gotta-
you're still going to be able to get a
Right,
general
okay,
ballot
right. For the
to vote here locally.
Right, to vote for the county offices, the mayor, the sheriff,
That's
the
right.
school board. Okay.
That's right, yeah. And
And
we'll
if
have
you're a
some
Farragut
people.
resident, you'll get that ballot as well.
Yeah,
Okay,
and we have a
okay.
lot of people that'll do
Right.
it. Again, they will not
Right.
declare a primary,
Right.
Doug.
Now what happens about 3 months later, then November 8th, is it this
Well,
year?
the
November
best
6th.
part for
6th.
us is that we don't have to ask that question of which primary you wish
Yeah,
to
in
vote,
that
because
one.
there's only a
ballot.
general
Uh-huh.
ballot.
Yeah.
Right.
And everybody gets to vote it, of course,
Right.
depending on the district they're in.
And on that ballot, you'll only see the federal and state,
That's right.
That's correct.
the statewide offices.
That's
Right.
correct. And
That's right.
occasionally you will see a question on referendum,
Right.
or
Yeah.
perhaps
Okay.
city council wants something
Right.
put on the ballot,
Exactly.
whatever that may be.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're now down to, we know how to register. Actually, it's pretty straightforward. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, it is. I mean, there are things you have to provide. You have to provide information. You have to tell the truth. Sometimes you have to go and appear before someone who is deputized or certified.
Right.
But basically, once you've registered, that's pretty easy. Which was a question I forgot to ask. How long does the registration last?
Well, here's the thing. Once you're registered, you're going to stay registered unless you move to another county or state, unless you get convicted of a felony. If you die, we're going to purge you.
Right. Okay, how do you know when we die?
Well, believe it or not, we go through the obituaries.
Oh, you do? Okay.
It's locally, and then the state gives us information
From
constantly.
the Department of Vital Records.
Right, and
Okay,
so
right,
then,
okay.
and we use
Oh,
that
vital
to check
records,
our
yeah.
records
Sure,
and
okay.
to try to purge
Okay,
people
right.
from the rolls.
Right.
But which I know this will please your Democratic viewers out there, but we no longer are going to send what we used to send, the confirmation card when you haven't voted in 2 November general elections. We don't do that anymore. We get specific information that somebody has perhaps moved.
Yeah.
Then we'll send it. But
Right.
we're not doing the mass mailings
Right.
anymore.
Well,
So
so that says two things. One, you're not going to purge voters arbitrarily. I mean, you don't have a process for just arbitrarily.
Well,
Well,
it wasn't arbitrary
yeah,
to begin
no,
with,
no,
but
but I mean-
it won't be just for lack of
Right.
inactivity.
But it was almost
that's what I meant by arbitrary. Good point.
yeah, they people hadn't voted in a decade. The law assumed you had either moved or died.
Right, exactly.
And now what you're going to find is I think our records are going to be, our numbers are going to be somewhat
be
bloated.
inflated,
They're going to be
yeah.
inflated.
Right.
So people are going to say, oh, these people are registered, they're not voting. Well, we don't know that they're all still in Knox County or
Right, yeah,
alive
you don't,
anymore.
exactly right.
But that's okay. We'll follow the law however it is.
That's good, exactly. Well, there's a lot of other questions I had to ask you about, but I think the thing is how to register. Once you register, what do you do to vote, and when you vote? So okay, so we got just in review coming up this year in May.
May the 1st,
May the 1st.
August the 2nd,
Right.
November the 6th.
Okay, those 3 days, big elections.
Early vote.
Yeah, that's right. Okay,
Yes.
right. Early votes.
No.
2 weeks of early voting prior to the election.
14 days. It starts 20 days before, ends 5 days before.
Okay.
And I would just tell your viewers real quick, I know Cliff will close with some comments, but our website is a treasure trove of information.
Yeah.
I encourage people to go to that
Right.
website.
Why don't you talk just briefly about the website, and we'll close it up at that point.
It's knoxcounty.org/election, and you can find ballots,
It's on-
candidate lists, everything you need, schedules.
Including your own registration
That's correct.
and
That's
where
right.
where you're going to vote.
Right.
It's pretty slick. I will say this: it's pretty slick. I've had to learn it because
Yeah.
not that it's not intuitive. It's not my intuitive. But once you've learned it, it's all there. I mean, it's.
But no information about candidates per se. That we don't
Yeah,
we don't
that's
talk about candidates on there. People are always calling
okay.
wanting us to
Beyond
talk
just
about
their
a
name and
candidate.
address.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
we don't promote them, that is.
What
Yeah,
else?
we
I
don't.
know. Why would they expect you to promote them?
They expect all
they-
kind of
they
things,
do.
Doug.
Okay, all right. Well, we don't expect you to do that.
Good.
Yeah, okay, we don't do that. But anyway, well, in closing, I want to just say we're kind of out of time.
Yeah.
Thanks to the audience for watching this interesting, informative discussion about the Knox County elections. We certainly urge them to vote in this first primary election coming up in the next few weeks, and that they vote. When does early voting start for that?
April 11th.
So April 11th is the cutoff. That's the day you start voting early.
Yes.
And then in the August state and federal primary in August, which is also the day that we'll vote for the final vote for the county elections. And I would just say that this is a busy year. Plan to vote. We'll return in a couple weeks with another interesting and informative Democratic TV.